Hey, folks, we are back for another episode of It's Consulting Time, where we are always bringing you a plethora of creatives, innovators, and leaders from around the globe. Purpose over popularity is our motto, and we never fail to leave you with joy, jewels, and justice. Let's chat with our special guest. And we're back. And Radheya is back here with us again. Now, if you were over on Instagram Live some time ago, we had a spectacular conversation about life, right? We
Yeah, we
talked
really did.
about all of the social ills, but we also talked about growing up in the perfect life and how it can suffocate you and leave you angry and insecure. But when you break free, amazing things happen. And so today, Radheya is back. He's a second generation South Asian poet and musician, and we are glad to have you back.
Yeah, thanks, Lily. It's awesome to be here. I'm just going to say one thing as we start, because I get this question about the mask and why I wear the mask. And people tell me it looks like Squid Games. So now everyone associates me with that weird Korean Netflix show. But this thing is very important to me. And the reason is exactly what you said. I grew up with everything, I grew up with all the right boxes checked. But the face that I had to present to the world wasn't me, it wasn't authentic. And it was almost like I need to subjugate myself. I need to act a certain way. I need to keep my head down. I need to follow along. And all of that to me is like putting on a mask. It's very strange because for me, when I put on this mask, this is when I'm being authentic. This is when I'm taking off all of the layers. I'm taking off all the conditioning. I can speak freely. So symbolically, it's very important to me. And that's why I present myself in this mask. We live in a world where sincerity is not respected, where people can lie to your face in real life. And in a sense, our politicians do this, our media personnel do this. They go out, they're always wearing a mask. I do this to reclaim my authenticity. And that's the reason that I wear this.
You know, wow. And I already know we're going to go there because we did before.
Mhm.
One of the things that I love is your statement that oppression exists because
Mhm.
we follow along.
Yeah.
Let's expand upon that before we get into talking about the song remains the same part two.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. This is something that I've seen in my own life, and I believe it applies more generally.
Yeah.
Maybe I would change the phrasing, Lily, because I don't want to dismiss oppression. It's not just because we follow along. There are
Okay.
real situations that people feel, there are oppressive conditions.
Indeed.
I would say it survives. I would replace exists with survives. It
Yes.
survives because we follow along.
Okay.
So, what do I mean by that? I look at myself, grew up South Asian, grew up thinking of myself a certain way. Honestly, I always felt like there was something wrong with me because of my culture, because of the color of my skin. And I felt like I needed to fit into a white world. And that is a narrative. The more that I've gotten into it, it has a 600-year colonial history. There is a history of that going back to the 1400s. And the recipe is very familiar. The recipe is colonize, appropriate, and convince other people to follow along. And if you can buy enough people off, you see this whether it's in India, my home country, you see it in some of the other colonized nations. You go in and you get other people to be complicit. So you start doing whatever you're doing. If you're the British, you go in and you take resources and you treat people as second class citizens. But you can take enough of those people and you can say, look, if you do what we're telling you to do, if you help us keep the population in line, we can elevate you. You've seen the same thing in South America. You can be closer to power, you can have more money, you can have land, you can have education, you can have that status. I mean, frankly, the Middle East, we've seen the same thing post the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And people go along with this. And they go along partially because it's about money, but it doesn't just have to do with money. Eventually, this stuff gets baked in. It becomes more of a sign of status to align with the oppressors than to be part of the oppressed. And we start seeing the world that way. I think what's dangerous, at least from my standpoint, I'm curious what you think about this, if
Mhm.
you've gone through the same thing. What was really hard for me was not even knowing that another way existed. I didn't even know there was another reality. this was so much of my reality that this is just how society is organized. There's a hierarchy, and it starts with the people who are the darkest at the bottom, and it goes up to the ones who are the fairest at the top. You look at Indian cinema, all of the actresses are very white. The gods are painted in white colors. You think about terms like fair versus unfair. What does
Uh-huh.
that mean? I mean, what is that psychologically telling us about who's valued and who's respected
Yep.
and who's not? So all of this becomes such a part of our background that, at least in my case, and I can't speak for everyone, but in my case, I wasn't even aware that this was something to be questioned. And it wasn't really until I got into my 30s where I felt enough pain. You know, I felt like maybe there was some part of my spirit which still existed, which needed to break out. Maybe I'd suppressed too much, whatever it was. There was this internal revolt, and I felt like I needed answers. I needed to move in a different direction. And that's really when I started thinking about myself differently and challenging some of these assumptions that I've had. That again, it's kind of like being a fish in water. If you're a fish, you don't know what water is because you don't know that there's anything else around.
Indeed. You know, I agree. When I say I agree 100%, I think that, like you, we grow up, you know, being told, okay, you have to do it this way. It's only this way. And what is this way? You go to school, you get amazing grades, you go to college, you get a great job or career, and you raise a family. That's what we're taught, right?
Yeah.
And you do that. But yet you still have, like you say it, there's still another part of your soul that doesn't feel fulfilled. And it's mighty interesting that for the majority of us, it's that creative
Mhm.
part.
Mhm.
We need that creative part because that's the part that allows us to truly get these things out. Hence why you were able to raise consciousness around these uncomfortable topics. I mean, guys, the song remains the same. Part one, like, you know, you have to check your brain, modern slavery, Black Lives Matters, Corona, all of
Mhm.
these things he was able to use his artistic abilities to shed light on. And now, because of it, he's back with part two. And it's an awakening.
Yeah. Yeah. The song remains the same is interesting. It really looks at racial oppression and police brutality in my lifetime.
Mhm.
And I was a teenager in the 90s, and I remember seeing the Rodney King. I grew up in LA, so that was such a big deal in LA back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And so I trace it in my history. I mean, of course, this has been going on for such a long time, but I just look at it from my standpoint.
Mhm.
And you got Rodney King, and then you go from Rodney to Amadou Diallo to Trayvon Martin. And then it's almost like in rapid succession. You just get death after death, incident after incident, culminating with George Floyd. And I look at this whole thing, and what I try and ask from parts one, two, and three is what's going on. And the song remains the same. It's interesting. It's a bit of a tension, Lily, that name, because on the one hand, things are the same if you just look at it objectively. That we see the cycle again and again. You see the brutality, then you see the outrage. It's almost predictable. It's formulaic. You've got people who are getting up, who are chanting Black Lives Matter, who are saying we can't do this anymore. You've got politicians, corporations who come out who wave flags and say, yeah, we have to increase diversity, we have to change policing. Nothing happens. So in that sense, the song remains the same. In another sense, and this is what we start exploring in parts two and parts three, I do believe there is a change. And the change isn't yet so much in society, but it is a change in consciousness. And it's a change similar to these conversations that we're having. We talk about just an awareness of being a second class citizen, just an awareness of accommodating yourself to someone else's standards, to living a life based on validation, as opposed to living a life based on, as you're talking about, expressing yourself, sharing your gifts with humanity, living by your own rules versus what someone else is telling you to do. And that perspective has changed quite a bit. And you see it across the board. I mean, now there's an awareness that if you go back before the 60s and the civil rights era, minorities were pretty much in the same boat, whether you were Asian or you were from Central America or you were African American, you were all treated as second class citizens. And then we get past the civil rights era, and there's more of the stratification where it's the worst to be black. Then beyond that, if you're Central American, it's not as bad. And then you get up to the Asians and South Asians, but it's all part of the same system. It's all that same ladder. Whether you're higher or lower, you're buying into that same system. And for years, I mean, I would say for decades, we grew up not thinking too much of this. And I benefited from this in some ways materially because I had the good education and I had the opportunities. But now you have this whole generation of people who's coming out and talking about this. There was that woman who used to host an MTV show. I might be getting her name wrong, Suchin Park, or it might not be. I don't think I've got her name right, but this was back in the 2000s that
Uh-huh.
she was hosting. She was a VJ for MTV,
Okay.
and she's just come out talking about this. She just released a book talking about how she experienced this subtle form of discrimination and fetishizing because she was an Asian woman and feeling like she had to go through uncomfortable situations and
Mhm.
just put up with it. And she used humor to deflect it. So she would always make jokes about it and she would kind of laugh it off and she would become very skilled at shifting the interview to a different topic so she could get by that uncomfortable situation.
Yep.
But do you think about what that does? That fills you with rage. I mean, it just makes you angry. It feels like you just have to choke all of this down. So the fact that we are having those conversations now, in my view, means that at least the consciousness is changing, and we'll see what happens. Because then the other side of it is that you've got this backlash. You've got white America, which is threatened by this change from more of the minority part of the population. And you saw it play out in the Trump era. You see it playing out now with replacement theory, and just a lot of hatred on both sides. So I don't know where this is going to end up, but I do feel like we are on a path to change, however that happens.
You know, I would definitely agree. Um, I was saying the other day that I understand the need for legislation,
Mhm.
but you can't legislate people's hearts and minds.
Mhm.
You spoke about level of consciousness, level of consciousness, level of awareness, level of just compassion
Mhm.
for human beings. I think that until we really get to that place, will we really see the change that you and I desire to see because we know what we saw growing up. And in
Mhm.
our intimate space, we didn't see a lot of these things going on. We were more or less protected from it. But
Yeah.
then when we got out in the world, so to speak, we started to see, and it was like, oh man, wow. So, well, let's change gears for a minute because spoken word, poetry.
Mhm.
So, you've been doing a lot of writing,
I have.
but you've embarked upon something different and new,
Mhm.
performing.
Yeah.
What has that transition been like?
I mean, it's been really cool. It's interesting because I'm in the corporate world and I spend a lot of time presenting. And I've presented to large groups of people for 20 years, and I'm very comfortable doing this. I can get up on stage and it's like a script. It's almost like you flip a switch and I just go and I could record this and it's the same spiel over and over. And then I get up and I start performing and it's like all of a sudden I'm nervous. Number one, I'm going back to where I was 20 years ago, the first time I was up on stage. And number two, I realized that it's a completely different game. I mean, it is such a different game. When you're talking business, there's no soul behind it. It's just information that you're providing. You're providing facts. You don't really need to connect with people. And you get up on stage, it's all about heart, about who you are, about opening yourself up. And I found I was up there and I was stiff and I didn't know what to do with my hands. And I didn't know whether to kind of dance with the music or not, or to stand still or move around. And how do I explain this? Like I'm used to presenting in this voice where I'm projecting my voice,
Yep.
but you do too much of that, you don't draw people in. It's like boom, 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 boom. You need to mix it up a little bit. You need to be a little quiet, get them to come, that open up at the right time. And so there's a certain modulation and there's a certain tapping into whatever that spirit is that gives life to those words that I put down on the paper. And so all of that has been really, really interesting for me. I'm out about once a week. I'm doing open mics at a few different places in New York. One up in Harlem, one down on the Lower East Side, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I feel like my ability to get into character has totally changed. When I started doing this, Lily, I still saw myself as me. A lot of my story, it's these two sides. It's almost schizophrenic. I've got the model minority corporate guy, and I've got the lion who's like, the hell with this. I can't deal with this anymore. I just got to say what I want to say.
I'm with you. Trust me.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. I can see it. I can see it in your face.
Can I breathe for a second?
Yeah, take your time.
I'm listening to you. And you know, we went through this on our Instagram live. I'm listening to you and I'm just trembling because I know it's me, you know. And I had this conversation a couple of days ago where my brother and I are so different. Grew up in the same household, same parents, under the same rules, and we're totally different. I have always been the vocal kid. He has always been the rule follower. And now that he's older, he is attempting to be unapologetically him, but still apologetic about it. Versus me, I've always been unapologetically me to a degree. And even being in corporate America by day and being a correspondent, you know, by all else, it's still significantly difficult to reach my peer group because the way who society views as my peers are not really my peers. You follow me? Because when you grow up a certain type of way, your peers don't look like you for real.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what you said, that level of consciousness. You almost have to retrain your brain for the real world. Because realistically, I didn't know I was different until my 5th grade teacher let me know how different I was.
Yeah, she woke you up, or he woke you up?
Baby, in the best of the worst way, to the point that my parents had to come to the school. Wow. Because I thought what she did to me was just a teacher giving me a different project outside of my culture for the month that my culture celebrates. So, you know, I didn't know any different. Yeah. So trust me, I'm there. I always have to censor myself. But see, the blessing in it, and I think you have found this as well. The blessing is when you get to a point where you can censor yourself and and no one else is censoring you.
Yeah. You know, there's so much wisdom packed into that statement, because my view is that we all have to play certain roles at different points in time.
We do.
I'm not going to be the same way with my parents that I am when I'm on stage. I go to work, I got to play a certain role. The key for me, and I don't know how you feel about this, but the key for me is being clear on who you are. That's the problem that I had in the past. I wasn't clear on who I was. I thought I had to be something else. Now I've got that clarity. And when you have that clarity, you got a huge amount of freedom, because it's like, if I'm in one situation, I can be a certain way. If I'm in another situation, I can act another way. I can do what I need to do to survive. There's social frictions, there are customs that different people have, there are relationships that you can take to a certain point, but you can't go past a certain point with certain people. Not good or bad. It's just the nature of humanity, that everyone's a bit different. To navigate that world, you have to adapt, you have to be fluid. But having that clarity on who you are, it makes all the difference. Even if nothing external changes, you know who you are, and you also know what you're not willing to do. I think that's the most important thing. You can start putting up some limits and say, you know what, it's cool. You want me to do this? It's fine if you want it, but I'm not going to participate. I'm going to opt out. That's going past a boundary. That's compromising something about myself. I'm just not interested.
And really and truly, guys, you can only offer up your non-negotiables when you are truly aware of self and when you're honest with self. Because, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to validate ourselves for people that really don't have any power over anything.
Yeah.
When we really
that's the craziest thing to me about social media. It's just like anonymous herds of people sometimes who are making comments, who are deciding what's right and what's wrong. And it's like, who are they? You don't even know who they are. You don't know where this stuff comes from. suddenly it's a set of rules that you have to follow.
That's it.
I agree with you. It's like just step out. Other people want to do that. That's cool, but I'm going to figure out things that work for me.
So let's talk a little bit about what's next. Now, do you have any major performances coming up or anything like that? And where are some of the places that you would like to go to perform? Because we want to make it happen for you. We want you to be everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, I really appreciate it. I would say at this point, I'm still building out the brand and I'm building out the audience. So I've got the open mics. There's one in Harlem at a place called Harlem Nights. There's one at the Lower East Side at a place. It's called the Inspired Word. It's at the Parkside Lounge, but the name of the event is the Inspired Word. So far, I've been doing that. I've got some poetry workshops lined up where I'm still finalizing the dates. I'm going to be leading those, which is cool. I mean, I'm really excited about that. And I want to keep on growing this, Lily. I mean, it's actually been useful to have this time because I've really refined the delivery. I've been able to figure out ways to sync my voice up to the music to get the message out, but get it out in a way that it's kind of cool. It's like it's a cool beat, it's a cool delivery, it's something that people want to listen to. So I don't know. I mean, honestly, if you have ideas, I'd be happy to hear them. At this point, my whole thing is keep working the open mics, work the poetry workshops. I might start doing some events on my own this summer and bringing other people in. There's some spaces in New York that I can contract with and just start hosting my own events. But at this point, nothing scheduled.
So we're going to go ahead and put this out there. So congratulations to Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta, who is now the director of public engagement for the Biden administration. And so I charge you guys to push Radheya out there, push him to connect with her so that he can go to DC and start talking about this in only the way that he can. Because I think that this is the thing. Entertainers influence the political climate. Let's just be real. That's exactly why our former administration sought out an entertainer that would shake everybody up. And I'm going to leave it there. So why not go after our independent innovators, leaders, and creatives such as this gentleman right here? So guys, I charge everybody right now, figure out where he can be placed in your community to speak, to perform, to just show up. And let's push the movement forward. Because guess what? The song remains the same. Radheya, let everybody know where they can find you on social media and how they can make contact with you.
Yeah, will do. First of all, Lily, thank you. That's a beautiful message. And would love to connect with anyone and really just have some fun. I mean, I'm having so much fun taking this thing going forward. I would say you can find me, the Instagram handle is lion with a mic. So the animal like a lion with a mic, all one word. Check that out on Instagram. There's also a website, lionwithamic.com. And drop me a note. I would love to hear people's reactions. You got comments, you agree, you disagree. I'm using this, I've got a tagline, art in conversations. I love the art. I think that's the call to action. But to me, it's the starting point for a bigger conversation. So would love to hear people's perspectives.
Yes. Guys, seriously, reach out. Very approachable, very humble, very aware, and extremely conscious. You already know we are here to bring you joy, jewels, and justice. And if you don't feel like you got it from this episode, you're tripping, bro. All right. So once again, don't forget, go check out Lion with a Mic. He is everywhere. The song remains the same, part 1, part 2, part 3. Make sure that you check it out today. Have a great evening, ladies and gentlemen.